we are at Full Circle Funerals. My name is Ruth. I am a funeral director here at Full Circle Funerals. And Full Circle started, we're having our 8th birthday in a couple of weeks in September. And it was started by Sarah, an NHS doctor, with the hope and the wish and the desire to help make a challenging time easier for those who find themselves needing to make funeral arrangements. And also, I guess, the hope that, this would be something that people would feel that they don't have to get through, but something that could maybe be cathartic, healing, and it create a time and a space to just gain the right support for making funeral arrangements. Through our time as being funeral directors, we've become profoundly moved, motivated, wanting to just do the right thing by people with their grief journeys, and help to signpost people to things that might be helpful to them. And those could be creative things, they could be counselling, it could be peer support. And through that, I guess I've become a facilitator of a couple of peer support groups. I signpost people to bereavement support organisations, and I'm a trustee at Bradford Bereavement Support here in Bradford, and also trustee at an organisation called Lippy People, who have an amazing video storytelling project called it's called 4Ls, Life, Learning, Legacy, Loss, and being a trustee of their projects as well has been an incredible privilege. So through our team here at Full Circle and through our work at Full Circle, we're trying to make conversations about death, dying and bereavement more accessible to everybody, really. The purpose of today, though, is to share with you how can we as individuals, as practitioners, as part of a community, support people with their bereavement in their grief, and help them to understand what a grief journey might be, how that looks and how that might feel. We're going to talk about the fundamentals of loss and bereavement. We're going to talk about self-care after bereavement. We're going to talk a little bit about staying connected, about bereavement support, what might be around for people that could help them. How do we all help each other? And we're going to share questions and ideas and suggestions at the end, if that's okay. I need to just say, though, I am not a qualified bereavement counsellor nor a practitioner. I facilitate peer support groups, and I guess this is a summary of the reflections that people have shared with me and what I see as part of my work in supporting people to create funerals and facilitating those peer support groups and being trustee of those organisations. The presentation is intended to share some of those principles and ideas with you so that maybe you can identify what might help you and the people that you are close to and the people that you support, and maybe even yourself. This leads me neatly onto, I guess, who is it that we are supporting? If we are bereaved ourselves, we are perhaps looking for ways in which we can support ourselves through our bereavement and our grief journey. If we are grieving, we are probably and potentially supporting our family and friends, that thing that we do as human beings of saying, oh, I'm okay, but I'm really, I want to make sure if these people are okay, my children or my grandchildren or my friends, my family, I'm looking out for them, or I'm worried about my parent, that I'll be okay. But we are always supporting those who are around us at the same time. We might be supporting members of our family who've had a bereavement that's not within our family, if that makes sense. They've had a friend who's died or a colleague who's died, but with their grieving. We might be supporting them as a family member. We might be supporting our friends. A colleague, I used to work in a very large organisation, and even in a small organisation, your colleagues will find themselves perhaps bereaved at some time, and you will find yourself supporting them in your capacity as a colleague. And there's another side to this, isn't there? Are we an employer? Are we an employer who have employees to look after, and how are we looking after them when they've experienced a bereavement, and what does that look like and feel like? It might feel that we're in a silo, but we're not. We are aware of those emotional needs of those who are close to us and around us, and we want to do the right thing by them, and we want to do the best for them and try and support them in the best way that we can. And it's important in that, isn't it, to remember that every bereavement is different. And every person's grief is unique to them. And the nature of the death, whether it is expected or unexpected, the relationship to that person, whether that's a spouse, a partner, a parent, a sibling, a child, a friend, a colleague, our feelings about our relationship with that person, if we're all being very honest with each other, we would say that life is often complex and complicated, and therefore our relationships with people are often complex and complicated. That will impact our own experience of the grief that we are feeling. our own way of processing things. Somebody might be an emotional person, they might be a very literal person, there might be somebody who compartmentalizes things. We are a spectrum of all of those things, in between any of those things. And grief isn't sexist, it isn't ageist, it isn't racist. It spreads out amongst many things in our lives. And I think as an important part of how we support people is recognizing and understanding that all of those things are true about bereavement and grief. You will know, I guess, already this, but grief isn't something we talk about very much. Death, dying, and loss isn't something we in our society here in the United Kingdom talk about very much or very well at all, and find it quite a difficult topic and subject. Those of you who are involved in setting up things around, breaking down those barriers will understand that only too well. Some cultures are much more comfortable about talking around the subject and around, expressed emotions. And when we're not comfortable about talking about it, it contributes to grief being expressed mainly in private. There's a book called Atlas of the Heart by Brené Brown, which I know Sarah would highly recommend. And in her book, she shares that over the course of 5 years, she surveyed more than 7,000 people, and the average number of emotions that people could name was 3. And those were happy, sad, and angry. But if you ask people what words do you associate, if you hear the word grief or bereavement or loss or death, what are the words that you might associate with that? They'll say things perhaps as change, loss, isolation, fear, vulnerable, depression, questioning, memories, confusion, journey. So there are many, many, many other words and many, many other emotions and many other, things that we experience other than 3 emotions of happy, sad, and angry. So again, it's an important part to recognize that that's the case. Many people, or most people, I suppose, would associate grief with sadness, but I'm going to just talk through this slide and talk through a little bit about the fact that there are many, many, many more feelings that people will experience. And knowing that there are a greater number of feelings associated with a healthy and everyday bereavement can be reassuring for many. Because if we start to think, oh, I'm only on my own in this, and it's only me who feels this, that makes us, exacerbates that feeling of isolation and loneliness, perhaps. But if we were able to say, oh, yes, I felt like that too, or oh, yes, that's a really normal feeling, we're validating that for people. So what does grief feel like? Well, it feels often like shock, numbness, sadness, a hollow in our heart, a hollow feeling in our tummies. It might be denial, it might feel like anger, it might feel like relief, and it might feel like guilt, and then we might feel like guilt because we feel like relief. And all of these things are complicated and complex in many ways. And that comes back to the nature perhaps or how somebody died, and whether there was an expectation to it, and the relief comes from knowing that that person who had been in pain is no longer in pain. But then we might feel guilty for feeling relief, and it's all very complicated. We might feel helpless, and then depression and anxiety, people sometimes report feeling those things as well, and a yearning. In many of the traditional models of grief, the expression of yearning and wishing for the situation to be different and for somebody not to die is a very important part of those things that people talk about. Those are our emotions and our feelings. We also have physical manifestations to grief. And in my opinion, I think we're probably fairly poor about talking about this, because bereavement can have a very profound effect on our bodies. And from what I've read, most people would put this down to the increase of stress hormones being released at this time, noradrenaline and adrenaline, and inflammation within our body. And it can be very frightening to have physical feeling problems, and again, I think maybe it's reassuring to know, if we can validate that for people, that those are normal responses to grief. So headaches, joint pain, back pain, and stiffness. And I talk about joint pain, and I don't know if anyone can see it, but we hold our stress sometimes in our shoulders and our neck. So the neck and back pain, particularly over a long period of time, is often associated, can be associated back to the bereavement. And I've spoken to physiotherapists who, when they've worked with people who've got chronic pain or aches and pains, and they talk to their clients and they start to do their manipulations and things, that they recognize it comes back to a particular experience in their life where they've been bereaved and grieving. Digestive problems. So we don't necessarily absorb our food very well, and this we can also feel digestive problems as well. Chest pain and palpitations, anxiety and difficulty in breathing. And everybody will recognize poor concentration, the brain fog, the memory fog, not being able to quite process what people are saying to us or talking to us about, and sleep disruption. I wish I knew what it is that changes for that sleep disruption to then shift so it becomes less so. But I guess over the period of time, it probably does. It does shift, it might. But the sleep disruption could be that you fall asleep quite easily or well because you're tired and you're exhausted, but you wake up at bright as a button at 1 a.m, 2 a.m, and then can't get back to sleep because your brain has then gone into overdrive. Or it might be that you struggle to get off to sleep and then you wake and you only have a couple of hours sleep, and then you wake up and you've got to get ready for the next day again. So you feel very much, and we all know that sleep deprivation is a form of torture, really, because it's so debilitating when we can't sleep properly. I must stress, though, that any concerning kind of symptoms such as chest pain, shortness of breath, we shouldn't assume that these are due to grief, and medical assistance should be sought, because those are very, very, very serious physical manifestations that need to be checked out. But equally, once you get that reassurance and everything's okay, knowledge is power, and we can help to support ourselves with what we're experiencing. In bereavement, the principles of well-being, and this comes back to the previous slide a little bit, are sleep hygiene. So the whole idea about not being on your screen sort of an hour before bed, maybe a warm drink, making yourself comfortable, all those things that we could possibly do and try to do. Because why we can't sleep is because our brain is processing everything around us. It just can't kind of switch itself off, and it just keeps going, doesn't it? But if we can try to be in the discipline of sleep hygiene, then maybe that could help. Nutrition, eating small and regular meals, eating the rainbow. Sabine Horner, who's a lady who has done a blog for us before and has presented webinars before, talks a lot about how when we are grieving, what happens to us from a nutritional point of view with vitamins and minerals, and the impact that then has on our nutrition. And it's really quite a really interesting topic to get into, and there's some books and blogs and videos and things around it, and if you wanted to explore it a bit more, I would encourage you to do so, because it is really interesting. But yeah, nutrition, eating the rainbow where you can, small and often, because we know that appetite is suppressed, and staying hydrated where at all possible. Movement, a little bit of what feels good and suits you. Being outside is good for us, being in nature is good for us, and perhaps it's maybe more realistic to think about being able to go out for a walk for 10 minutes, and then come back in, and doing that every day if you can. Just try to just move yourself a bit, because being static and being held within ourselves maybe isn't quite so good for us. There are other things that people would also consider in terms of their well-being when they are grieving, and that might be art, being creative in some way, and being creative means different things to different people. Might be doing artwork, watercolors, or stenciling, or mosaic making, or needlework, or drawing. You don't have to be professional, and I learned this the other day when I went to a wellbeing workshop that was about doing watercolors, and I cannot paint, but it was the most cathartic 2 hours. It was just really, really lovely to just get involved in that, and just being able to just engage in something very mindfully, that you may find a way that expresses what you're feeling without necessarily needing to find words, because maybe with the words finding the words might be difficult, but being creative in some way allows us to be able to just do something that's really helpful. Music is such an important and powerful and emotive thing, and we use it in funerals all the time, don't we? That opportunity to have music played, because we choose somebody's favorite piece of music. It helps us to remember them. We want to just show them that we know it and we remember it, and it just has this really powerful and emotive moment, and it allows us to cry as well. It gives us that opportunity to just shed those tears and say, oh, this song makes me remember them so much, and have a few tears. There's other ways of using music. You might create a playlist that you use and play. There's a charity called the Swan Song Project in Leeds. You may have heard of it. They help you to create a song that, as a legacy, those people who already have a musical talent or leaning might already get into that anyway and just start doing that for themselves because they can. But there's the project with Ben at Swan Song is lovely, because for those of us who don't have any musical bones in our body, he gives you the opportunity to just create a song that you can have as a legacy for somebody. Or if somebody has a diagnosis and knows that they are approaching end of life, they might want to reach out and create a song that they then leave for their family in memory as well. So there are some opportunities there, isn't there, with music. Writing, journaling, creative writing, and Stephen's here, and he's the master of this who creates those beautiful creative writing workshops. But expressing in words, writing it down, whether you keep it or whether you dispose of it in some way, such as setting it alight on a bonfire or over a candle, whether you go back to it and read it, whether you just don't look at it again, or you keep it as a journal. It just becomes a progressive part of your thoughts and your processing. Writing things down it can be really, really helpful. And we have a community post box where people can write letters that they go into the post box. They won't be read by anybody at Full Circle for sure. They won't be read by anybody at all, but it's a chance to post something to somebody. And they've got these at many crematorias around the country as well. And it's a really beautiful way to just continue that connection to somebody and write things down. And it's just a very helpful way of looking after ourselves. Talking about somebody can be a barrier to conversation, because we know that the Good Grief Trust, for example, have many posters actually which are really quite helpful and insightful, that say, please say their name to me, I'm thinking about them anyway, please don't be frightened to talk to me, I'm not going to make this conversation difficult, I want to be able to talk and share, put the kettle on, let's talk about them, let's say their name. And we know that people around us might fear talking to us about the person who's died, but we should try to break down those barriers to conversation and do that wherever we can. There's an increasing awareness about the importance of connection, and how do we stay connected we know that the person isn't here with us in the physical sense, but how can we stay connected with them, keep their stories and their memories and what they meant to us sort of alive, and keep those connections going. Because you do meet people who say, we've never spoken about it since the funeral, we don't talk about them, nobody says their name. I only met somebody very recently who said, we've never talked about my parents' death, and they died 15 years ago. As a family, we just don't talk about them at all. But there is an increasing awareness about the importance of this connection. And whilst I'm talking, perhaps you'll be thinking of those connections that you already have, or that you do, or that you know that other people do. And an awareness to this is the first step. Who are we staying connected with, and who are we doing this for? How do we stay connected with the person who's died? And is it our family and friends? To ourselves, how are we going to do this? It might be that journaling is helpful and that we do it that way. With family, might we approach them to go for a walk or having a meal? I've got some more slides about this, so we'll come back to this a little bit. What activities did they do that help to support that continuing bond with somebody? You might pick certain dates and times or places, songs. There are memory jars and bears, and again we'll come on to that a little bit. But it's about what do you need, what is it that you feel important, and what are those things that might be realistic to kind of be able to do. So I can relate to this in the sense that our way of staying connected to my mom, who died 12 years ago, is we recognise dates such as her birthday and the anniversary of the date that she died with a Chinese meal. And we do this because she absolutely hated garlic but loved Chinese takeaway. So and her regular order was bean sprouts, which always amused my husband immensely, because he'd always say, she does realise that they're absolutely lathered in garlic, doesn't she? We'd be like, no, I don't think she does really, but we'll roll with it. Well, this is all lovely, she's enjoying herself, it's all great. And every twice a year, I guess, we have this Chinese takeaway in memory or in the spirit of my mum, and get the bean sprouts, so we can all acknowledge that she wasn't eating garlic really, it was all fine. So that's just one of my kind of reflections about what that means to us in our house. The continuing bonds theory, which is something that we talk about quite a lot here at Full Circle. as I said before, we understand that our relationship with somebody has changed because they're not here in the physical sense, but this is our rituals that we might do that help us to support those healthy bonds. And how can we do that? And I think probably everyone's familiar with the idea of having a headstone, whether that's sort of at the cemetery, whether that's for where the grave is or where the ashes might be interred. We might have some rituals about going and scattering the ashes or where they might be, and what we do. People who take them home and then say they talk to the ashes every night or every day, or and however that might be. Things that people may or may not be aware of, such as funeral directors can take ink fingerprints that can be used for jewellery making. So that helps us to stay connected with somebody, whether that's through a necklace or some key rings or cufflinks. And the fingerprint jewellery is often very tactile, so you can actually feel, I'm rubbing my hand, but you can actually feel the prints, as it were, because they're made in quite a tactile way. I had a lady who had a keyring made, and she keeps it in her pocket, and she said to me that the reason I want it on my pocket and not in a necklace around my neck is I'm not quite ready to talk to people about it, about my husband and his death, but if the keyring's in my pocket, I know that he's there and I've got that with me in my pocket, and I don't have to necessarily share that with anybody at the moment. That was her way. Locks of hair can also be used either to be placed into jewellery or placed into a resin or a heart resin kind of. There's lots of different things you can do, to be fair. We talked about places and objects. Do we go to somewhere once a year, twice a year, that reminds us of that person? We talk about them and we share stories and memories. Dates, I mentioned 2 dates in our house that are quite significant and ones that we always remember. With our food we have music, words and art, which we've touched upon. The memory making activities, so these are things such as making memory bears. So you see Wilbur there, my little bear Wilbur, he goes everywhere with me. He's been made from the clothes of somebody who's died, and I think these are really accessible opportunities because they only cost sort of £20-25. The clothes are given to the person who £15 or so, I guess, given to the person. They make these bears for you, and I've seen them where people who belong to a club, for example, and the sweatshirts on the club have an emblem on, and the emblem has been put on the paw of the bear. So it's a really lovely keepsake that you can share, and they're very soft and they're very lovely. And as I say, Wilbur comes everywhere with me because he's a great example of what you can do. The chocolate cake at the bottom there is from Sarah and her family, and this is how they remember Sarah's grandma and get to talk about Sarah's grandma, and they make this chocolate cake and share the recipe with everybody to be able to do that. The sand there, these are called sand memory jars, and the idea of these is that you can get different coloured sands. I'm not going to name a particular shop, but there's a particular craft shop where you can go and buy different coloured sands, obviously, and you can portion it out into little packets, if you like. Give children a little jar that a little jam jar of some description, and say to them, if you remembering, I don't know, say remembering grandpops, and you've got the colour blue, what does the colour blue remind you of when you think of grandpops? And they might say, oh, he had this really wicked blue hat that I used to steal off of him and play games with or whatever else. I'm going to put that in my jar. I remember grandpops by remembering the blue is his hat. What does the yellow remind you of? It reminds me of going to the beach and playing on the beach. And so you do that with all of the colours, and you layer it in, and the child can keep the sand jar in their room or with them or wherever they wish. And it's just an opportunity again for them to sort of have the opportunity to talk about somebody, say, oh, there's colour here, do you remember when we did this? And it's just an opportunity to get children involved, because I think we become quite, as adults, people are worried about how to talk to children about death, dying and loss, and any opportunities that we can have to help to involve them in the conversation, to help them to understand and process what's going on, can only be helpful for their own mental health and how they approach the subject going on in later life. So the sand jars are quite a nice way of being able to do that. At the bottom of the picture of these things, the lady holding a green stone. And these are ceramic stones. They're called cuddle stones, and they're lovely because you can put a little token amount of ash in those, and you can have that and hold that in your hand. And again, they're quite a tactile thing, and they just sit in the palm of your hand. They come in different colours, and it's just a chance to if the ashes have been scattered or interred somewhere, just to know that you've got a little bit with you that you might want to have as a keepsake. And there are lots of different keepsake ideas around for ashes after somebody has had a cremation service. I'm going to come on a little bit more now on to, we've talked about a lot of the creative things, I guess, and the opportunities, and there are many other things that we could talk about for quite a long time around creative workshops and things that might be helpful. We're going to come on to sort of more bereavement support. and there are different options for bereavement support. And what works for somebody might change with time and with experience. And I can give an example of that in a moment. But bereavement support, you know, sort of what does it look like? How can it be done? Well, it can be done on a one-to-one, you know, and that might be through counselling. It can be done in groups, and you can have, there's group counselling opportunities. Some organisations, such as a hospice, might run a 6-week structured grief awareness course that just helps people to, and it's topic based, and every week there's a different topic involved, and it allows people to just explore those and talk them through together. Groups might also look like peer support. So with peer support, there's not a counsellor there, or there might be a counsellor who's there just to check in and make sure everybody's okay. But peer support is more about people sharing their journeys, their experiences, and just supporting one another with things that they know they have found helpful or unhelpful, and just supporting one another. I've seen some most amazing examples of peer support, where, you know, I look at the fact that these people have connected with each other, and they now go out for dinner on a relatively regular basis, and think, you know, a year ago they didn't know one another, and now they do, and now they go out and they socialize and they support one another, and just all understand where each other are at and how they're feeling, which is just amazing. There are more anonymous ways of gaining peer support, and by that I mean that there are online opportunities, online platforms where you can be involved, and you don't have to necessarily you know, present yourself as somebody who is bereaved or what may have gone on for you, but you can sort of look in and see what other people are talking about, and sometimes listening and reading and hearing is just as important as talking and sharing and communicating yourselves, because it helps again to go, oh, okay, so it's not just me who feels like that, it's not just me who's going through this, there is somebody else, and that in itself can be quite helpful in that respect. Face-to-face counselling or peer support online, as I've just mentioned, and there's quite a lot of online things available. Some groups are working on telephone, so I know that some bereavement support charities such as Cruise and Bradford Bereavement Support, for example, offer their counselling through one-to-ones and the telephone and on Zoom. So I think again through the pandemic, when we've moved to Zoom, it's opened up those opportunities for people to have access to counselling that they might not have otherwise been able to reach out to, which I think is also very helpful. Some people might start off with one-to-one support, and then they might move to peer support. They might use peer support as a waiting area, if you like, for want of putting it a different way, whilst they're waiting for their counselling. If there's, you know, a delay to counselling starting, they might come to peer support as a way of just starting those conversations and connections with people, and helping to reduce that sense of isolation whilst they're waiting for the counselling to happen. And yeah, I think it's about knowing that there are actually many resources available, you know, and hopefully you might find what is helpful to you, and that hopefully there might be something for everybody. There's podcasts, so Griefcast, as the little umbrella shows there, there's podcasts available, there's books, you know, social media, and you know, it's not all doom and gloom social media. There are some really good and useful sites available for people. Does the timing of when you reach out for bereavement support matter? Because there are some sort of counselling theories that say that you should wait for 6 months after the bereavement for waiting for accessing bereavement counselling, and there are those who would say don't wait, just, you know, particularly I think when maybe somebody's experienced a trauma, and maybe access trauma counselling support, and then maybe move on to bereavement support. But the timing is down to every individual, isn't it? Some people recognise immediately that they need help and they need support, and they need to reach out to somebody and ask for that. And it's trying to find out what that is, and whether that's, you know, listening to some podcasts, going to a peer support group. Other people, I met somebody the other day who said to me, she came to a peer support group and she said, oh, I haven't done anything with my grief for 10 years, actually. I've been busy working, raising a family, keeping going, doing this. But now I know, now that I've entering my retirement, I need to actually acknowledge it. I need to do something with it. So I'm coming to the peer support group. And then after a couple of times of coming, she said, I didn't really realise quite how much I wasn't processing everything. And this has been really, really helpful to just be able to talk and meet and share with people. And I think, you know, one of the things that we've learned over time is that there is no one way to do this. There is no one way to experience grief, and everybody's journey is different. And people will know when they need to reach out for help and support, but it's important that they know where to find it and how to do it. And that support might be very general, or it might be due to specific circumstances. So there are organisations, so the lady who's here from SANS, for example, there are organisations who are there to support people in very, very specific circumstances, whether that might be through the loss of a child, whether that's through suicide, whether that's through cancer. There was unfortunately there's not anymore in Yorkshire, but there was a charity who offered bereavement support for those who had died by a brain tumor. So there are things available, and I would always recommend looking at the Good Grief Trust's website. They have a massive, extensive list of resources of organisations that are available. There's like over 800 organisations on their website, and they've got an excellent map where you can help to just find things that might be in your area. Now, those are things that, of course, they know about. There will be other things going on that they're not necessarily aware of, but you, as in your locality, might know of, for example, and say, oh, yeah, actually, we could signpost you to this. And I've seen, and I don't know, you may have experienced this, but social prescribers are reaching out more and more to organisations who offer bereavement support, because they are working with people in the community who've gone to their GP. The GP has kind of directed them to social prescribers. Social prescribers are then reaching out to different things in people's communities and saying, I wonder if this could be helpful to you. So whether that's volunteering, reaching out for bereavement support, joining an older people's group, they're all and this is how social prescribing works. And there seems to be more and more of that happening. One of the things that I guess is sort of becomes apparent, I think, perhaps when you're speaking with people and you're talking to people about what's gone on for them and what's happened for them, talking is therapy, and we do know this, but it may involve that they want to just share the reliving or share their story with you and experience many times, and that may be hard to hear. It might feel that maybe it might seem outwardly that they maybe feel a little stuck, but actually what they're doing by reliving their story and sharing their experience again is it's helping them to solidify their processes. It's helping their brain to just try and understand what's happened. And active listening is really important in that, that acknowledgement, repeating things back, eye-to-eye contact. Active listening is so important when we're talking to people about what's happened for them. I'm going to touch a little bit on what returning to work might look like and what can support us when we're returning to work, because this is a big thing for people, after they've had some time off, and it varies, doesn't it, what people do between the time of the death and then the funeral and then going back to work afterwards. But there is a point where there is a consideration about returning to work, and for some people it might be in between the death and the funeral, it might be after the funeral, it might be some time after the funeral. Again, it's recognizing that each person is different and what they might need is different, and the support that they need is different at a different time. So what do people worry about when they're returning to work? They could be worrying about all sorts of things like, I'm really tired, I don't know how I'm going to get through the day. What are people going to talk to me about? What are they going to say? Are they going to be able to talk to me? Are they just going to just not say anything? Do I want them to say something? What do I want them to do? How do I want them to respond to me? What if I can't cope? Do I have to stay all day? Will I be able to do it? When's my next holiday? When can I book some annual leave? When can I have some time off? How am I going to manage childcare? How am I going to, all of these different things will be, conundrums for us going on in our heads when we're trying to work out about how to return to work. And, what should the employers consider when somebody's returning to work? What does that look like? And, this is a broad brush because, every organisation, whether it's small, medium or large, will need to work out for themselves, won't they, about how to support somebody returning to work. And the circumstances of a bereavement can be a very unique set of circumstances. So do they have a bereavement policy? Because it's not compulsory for them to have one. It's not a legal mandate for them there to be a bereavement policy. If they have one, what does that look like? Has it been thought through? Has it been considered? What does it all look like? Is there flexibility within the workplace to offer a phased return? So just come in for a couple of mornings this week, come in for a couple of, 5 mornings next week, maybe full days. Is it possible to offer flexible hours? Is it possible to offer working from home? My husband's company have what's called a duvet day, which I've never heard or know anywhere else. But you're allowed 3 duvet days a year. You might need to ring and go, do you know what, today I can't do it. I'm just gonna have a duvet day. And again, I say that with a broad brush, appreciate that this is not always going to be possible for every organisation to be able to do this when for whatever reason. But is there a quiet space at work? Is there somewhere where somebody can go off and just take themselves off for a breather, for a cup of tea, some fresh air? Is there an opportunity to be outside? You know, is there a chance to just be able to take yourself off and have a few moments because that's what you need at that particular moment in time? Compassion and understanding from your boss, from your colleagues, maybe from your customers and your clients, whoever it might be. That's really quite key as well, isn't it? Being able to say, do you know what? I'm not feeling so good, and then go, oh gosh, okay, is there anything I can do that helps? You know, what would you like me to do? Would you like to talk? Would you not like me to talk? It's okay to say to me, don't talk to me, just leave me alone. But if you said that to me, then I'll know that that's what you want, and I'm doing the best I can for you, and that it's okay to not be okay. I remember going back to work and people talking to me like I should be able to hear and understand what they were saying, and I had absolutely no clue. And I was looking at them thinking, your lips are moving, but I have no idea what you're saying. But in a couple of weeks, I hope to be able to just be able to be a better boss to you all, because at the moment I don't quite get it. And I remember that really clearly, that the lips were moving, but I didn't hear or understand what the words were. And it did change, it did get better, but you know, that was a thing when I went back to work. I think if as an employer that you have the opportunity to have an awareness of anniversaries and significant dates, that could be quite important for somebody. And I say that because they may be a bit quiet leading up to an anniversary or a significant date, and you're not really sure why or what's going on, and you want to check in and make sure they're okay. But if you've already got an awareness of that, you've got a sense of saying, oh, hang on a minute, this might be why. Or they book a day off in the middle of the week that they wouldn't normally do. That could be because they've booked that off because they don't want to be at work on that day because it's an anniversary. And you might have an awareness of, oh, are you off doing anything nice tomorrow? Well, actually, you know, it's a significant date. So no, I'm not really going to do anything nice. I'm going to do this because this is how I feel right now. It just helps, doesn't it? I guess, to just have an awareness. And again, at the end of the presentation, it'd be really lovely to hear from you all as to what you have found helpful or helpful. And I can see there's some things in the chat, but I'm not looking at them because I feel it's going to distract me from my stride. So I'm going to come back to those if that's okay. Over the last few years, there's been quite a bit of conversation around vicarious trauma and bereavement at work, you know, and is there a difference between them all? I'm not going to go into it too much, but you know, vicarious trauma where others are experiencing pain and suffering, and you identify with them, and it becomes part of your experience. And I think, you know, this happened through the pandemic, really, particularly those who were working in healthcare, or even just, you know, I think maybe we all experienced vicarious trauma in one way or another over that period of time. But that's definitely an area of awareness and expertise for sure. And bereavement at work, what does that look like? Well, you know, we people who are professional carers, for example, form very close relationships with those people that they support. And so people who work in care homes, for example, you know, is it recognised that they will be feeling sad and grieving for the person that they've cared for the time that they've worked there or been with them? And bereavement is you know, is when somebody important dies, somebody who's important to us dies, and that's what it means. So, you know, it's not surprising that we work closely with somebody, we're a carer for them, we make those relationships. I might be at work, but also, you know, I've formed a bond and relationship with somebody. So, you know, that's an important aspect of looking after people in those work environments. And how do people look, you know, how do they look after each other? And that might be, for example, if there's an opportunity for the care team, any members of the care team, to go to the funeral, that can be an important part of their bereavement process, if you like. Or if they can't, they know when the funeral is, there's an opportunity to bring the team together and light a candle and maybe play some music, so that they have a chance to recognise that this is an important thing for them and time for them. So just a little touch on that, really. So how can we help each other? Let's invite the conversation and say their name. Let's talk about them. Perhaps saying to somebody, how are you today? Because if you say to somebody, how are you, there's a couple of things that happen. First is that's a really overwhelming question, because that's quite, again, a broad brush. Some people will say to you, be thinking, oh, I don't think you really want to know how I am, because that I just feel like you don't really want to know, or you're not really asking because you do want to know. But if you say to somebody, how are you today, what you're doing is giving them the chance to say, do you know what, today I'm doing okay, yesterday not so good, today okay. or the other way around, however that may be. And you just make that question slightly easier to answer, perhaps. So just an idea. That remembering that there are activities that we can offer and offer to do and support general health and well-being. Let's invite that connection with somebody. You know, let's say, you know, if they mention, you know, Uncle Bob's name, what did Uncle Bob like do? What was his, you know, what did he like in particular music? What is it he enjoyed? Giving them a chance to just open up and talk to you. And I think this is the key thing, to keep trying, because on a particular day, somebody may not be able to talk to you or tell you how they're feeling. But don't give up, because on another day, they may really, really want you to and be able to. And if you don't ask, you won't know, and they won't be able to say something. So again, not always the easiest thing to do, but if there's an opportunity to say, oh, I haven't asked you for a while, but how are you doing? I've left you alone for a little while because I wasn't sure that you wanted to talk. Are you okay? What do you want to talk about? Anything? Just that opportunity to keep trying. We know how easy it is to or it just becomes very easy, doesn't it, to not ask and think they're okay. But if you open it up and welcome it and be open to the idea and active listening, then it gives somebody an opportunity. I'm sure they'll soon tell you if they don't want to or they can't. But yeah, that's my top tip, I think, is just to keep trying.